So, we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be 3 weeks in the book of Mark leading up to Jesus' journey to the cross, like it says right there. And so spoilers abound. There's going to be a cross at the end. JD will cover that. I'm not going to try and steal thunder, but he's going to talk about it. Jesus is going to mention it so many times we can't avoid it. But we're going to talk about what does it look like as Jesus sets his eyes on this really horrific ending that's got this awesome, not too many spoilers. It's going to get good in the end too. He's headed towards this with a resolve and a conviction that is unbelievable when you look at and understand the context. And so that's what we're going to be doing for 3 weeks. Please read through the book of Mark. We're going to start right here in chapter 8, so you got some catch up to do if you go home and want to read it. But it's a wonderful gospel. It shares that story of Jesus. So to get into this story, and by the way, JD made this clear, that's the main guy. If you at the end of today, you're like, I didn't really like that message, I'm not the main guy. There's another guy. Starting Easter, he'll be back. So it's good. Buckle up. But we're going to start with some context. Jesus has been, at this point, doing some miracles. He's been teaching and doing stuff, and he's gathered these 12 disciples, and a bunch of other people are following along and kind of interested in this new teacher that seems to have a power that is different. He seems to be special in these different ways. And at some point, Jesus has been he healed another guy, and he's hanging out with the disciples, and he asks them this question. And we're going to get right here in Mark chapter 8, I think starting in verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on. Is this up? Okay, great. It's right here. Y'all can see it. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" Are you ever in a situation where someone asks a question and you're like, I'm not even sure what category of question this is, and I'm going to say love, and they're like, no, I meant like we always start at 10. That's the most important thing. But this feels like one of those questions where you're like, I don't know where you're going with this. This feels like a setup. And they say what is a nice cop-out answer. They say, other people have said, here's what I've heard. Other people say John the Baptist. Others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. And then he zeroes in like Jesus loves to do. But what about you? Who do you say I am? And this is where context is so important. We know if you've read the whole thing or even just heard the general gist, you kind of know some answers that these guys are still a little in the dark. Jesus, there's a lot of stuff he hasn't done yet. He's done some miracles. He's taught about God. If you were there when he got baptized, that was an interesting moment. You took some notes, like something happened there. But there's a lot of mystery still, right? And so it's a lot of like, you've been here. What do you perceive is happening right now? It's a big question. And Peter answers. He says, you're the Christ. In other Gospels, he says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And in other Gospels, Jesus really clearly confirms, yeah, that's true. But he also warns them not to tell anyone else. He says, okay, let's keep that to ourselves for now. Just wanted to know if you guys knew that. And until this moment, he hasn't really told them much about what's about to happen. But something unlocks here. I think something unlocks when it's clear, okay, they have a sense of this. They understand something about what's going on. But there's a lot they're missing. We will come to find out in the next few verses. Starting in verse 31, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man, that's Jesus, must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. And I love this. He spoke plainly about this. We just got through with this series on Revelation. It was awesome. There's like lizards coming out of the ocean and heads on stuff. It was crazy stuff. And there's a lot in there that you're like, interested to see how that plays out. I'm just going to kind of wait and find out what that meant, right? But there's other stuff in Revelation where it's really clear. And this is in, the Gospels has a lot more of that stuff, where Jesus is just like, I'm going to be as plain as possible. This is not a trick. This is not a riddle. This is how it's going to be. And so he says that. He spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. I'll fill in the pronoun. Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke, capital J, Jesus. Good move, Pete. If you're Peter and you're reading that, you're like, man, now that I see it like that, I would have maybe phrased it like a question or, done an encouragement sandwich or something. But yeah, that's exactly how it went down. But it's kind of obvious why Peter's reacting like this. Peter has been, the disciples at this moment, they don't understand the whole picture, but they've given up a lot. They're laying down boats and leaving family and following this guy across the countryside. And now he tells them, this is a little more short-term ministry than you've been thinking. I'm going to die. I'm going to be handed over and die. And I'll be raised again. They don't hear that part. It's so obvious they don't hear that part. But this is going to take a major curveball here. And who likes change? Put your hand down. I say I do. I'm a person who's like, oh, I like change. Until the change matters at all. Until the change has any impact on my life. A year ago, I told Aaron, we're out of the tiny Ziploc bags. There's the sandwich kind. When I grew up, there was one kind of Ziploc bag. It was the sandwich size. And now we've evolved, man. It's great technology. And but the little one, there's the one called the snack size. And it's about half a sandwich. It's long like this. I said, we need more of those. She gets snack size Ziploc bags. Well, they changed them. I don't know if you know. I'll catch you up so you're not alarmed like I was. Instead of long and skinny, they're narrow. And the zipper's on the top. There's nothing I ever put in a snack size that doesn't fit in the new one. And I was irate. I didn't get an email from the Ziploc people. They didn't go, hey, we're thinking about making some changes. They just did it. It just got put on me, and I hated it. I still it was a year ago. I still feel something about it. But from their perspective, this just changed dramatically. And Jesus, when he gets rebuked, here's how he responds. Pretty direct. He's a direct guy. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." Ouch. "You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." And what comes out here, we're about to read the next part of what Jesus is telling them really, really matters. But what comes out here is every one of us, we've got an agenda. We've got in our mind, this is how this is going to play out and who I'm going to be and how it's going to impact things. And Jesus said, I would like you to just put that down. You have in mind the things of men, not the things of God. Then he called the crowd to him. This is interesting. He's telling the disciples, they got in on the secret. Thankfully, the crowd didn't hear Peter rebuke Jesus. That would have been more embarrassing for Peter. But after he calls him Satan, he says, okay, everybody, come here. Calls the crowd. And with his disciples, he says, this is in verse 34, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it." And I think this is one of the most core messages of the gospel, is giving up your own way. And it's the hardest thing to do, because we can think, I'm on the major stuff that Jesus said, there's some don't kill and some of that, I'm crushing it. And yet, there's ways where I'm pretty much 100% determined to do the thing that I think is best next. Maybe not necessarily what God is up to and what God is trying to accomplish. Giving up my own way. The word is autonomy. Now, I asked who liked change. We had one fibber and everyone else was pretty honest. Who likes autonomy? Everybody. If your hand is down, you probably need to get in touch. There's so I remember being young and single and wanting to be married, but not being married. And I was at my married friend's house, and just kind of trying to observe, what is this like? They're like a year into this thing, so they don't know what they're doing either, but I'm watching, and I'm hanging out with him and her. I'm friends with both of them. And there's a football game on, but we start like talking more deeply about stuff. I don't even remember what we're talking about. And she says, hey, just turn off the game. Turn the football game off, because we're talking. And he's like, no, I really want to watch this. And I look at the screen, and it was like Tampa Bay, and I was like, bad Tampa Bay. I was like, I know what you like about football. You don't want to watch this at all. And she's like, why do you care? These aren't your teams. She knows he doesn't want to watch it. And he goes, well, this running back, he was going to get cut at the beginning of the season. I want to see. It's like there's 2 weeks left. They're not even making the playoffs. He's like, I just want to see if they're going to draft a running back or not. He's making this. It's fiction. He is lying. And I'm sitting there going, what is, and it becomes a fight. And I'm sitting there for the fight, like, this is awkward, like all of a sudden, I didn't have a phone to look at because we didn't have smartphones, so there's nothing interesting. I'm just kind of looking at the ceiling, And I remember leaving their house going, what on earth? Why do these people fight about everything? I know he doesn't care about that game. If I had said, you done with the game? He'd be like, yeah, whatever. But it's about autonomy. It's about someone is telling me what to do, and I'm a grown adult. Then I left that house realizing, man, that's going to be hard. If I ever get married, that's going to be one of the hardest things, right? I, at the time, was living alone. I loved living alone. Everything was the way I wanted it to be all the time. This is how autonomous and I had known this about myself for years. If you tell me, let's say you go see a movie that's like really awesome, and you can be like, oh, it's such a good movie, man. Cool, I'm interested. And then you say, you have to see it. People just say that. They don't mean anything. I'm never going to see that movie till the day I die. False. I do not, and I'll show you. I will not see it. I didn't see Goonies till I was 25 years old. No, sir. Check yourself. I do not. So I'm at this friend's house realizing, man, this is an area I need to grow in. I really need to, like, what Jesus is talking about. I need to lay down my life. I need to lose my life and just understand what it means to not be that. So then a couple years later, my lovely wife and I start dating. We were a mess. We were Ross and Rachel, if you Google it if you're too young. But we on again, off again. And so we start dating. It's real serious, and I'm getting to I think this is like going places. And if you are engaged or thinking about getting engaged, you should go get premarital counseling. I knew that. But I was like, before I go spend money on jewelry, I would like a professional. I would like a professional to look at this relationship and tell me, no, yeah, this is good. This is a good thing. So we go to pre-engagement counseling, which is a thing. And I was like, good, that's what I want. And he gives us these questionnaires we take separately, these weird questionnaires about our everything. And then what he did, I love how he did this, because he sat us down and he said, look, I'm not here to tell you if you're compatible. Like, everybody has stuff where they're going to have to give and take in any relationship. I'm going to try and make you guys aware of, given the way that you're wired, these are the kinds of conflict you're going to run into. And I want you to be aware of that so you know what you're signing up for, and you can go, okay, and you maybe have some tools to deal with those. And he starts telling us these things. He's like, so Ryan, so you are, one of the things we measure is autonomy, how important it is to you to do things your own way. And I was like, man, I've grown so much in this. And he's like, you're in the 97th percentile. I was like, and that's out of 100? He's like, yeah, right there. If you ever want to know you've accomplished nothing, go to premarital counseling and say, tell me who I am. So, so pray for my wife, right? That's reality. He goes, this is going to be a thing. And so anyways, I understand when we talk about autonomy, I get it. It's hard, right? And for all of us, laying our life down is hard. That's what we're going to look at as we look at the rest of this story. But it's about giving up my own way. We're going to fast forward, okay? That's Mark chapter 8. Jesus tells them, he says what's going to happen. They don't get it. One chapter later, and it's pretty linear. He's like, they went over to this village and then they were here. So this is not like years later. This is a little bit later. This is Mark chapter 9. And I'll just tell it. This one's not on the screen. But he basically tells them the same exact thing. He says, hey, in a little while, I'll be betrayed. He used the word betrayed. He added one little detail. I'll be betrayed into the hands of men. They'll kill me, and after 3 days, I'll rise again. And the obvious response is, yeah, you just said, yeah, we heard it. You just said it. But instead, they get into some kind of argument. They're going on to a village, and Jesus is like, hey, what were you guys talking about? And this is in verse 33. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? What was that? I heard something back there. But they kept quiet. Because on the way, on the road, they had argued about who's the greatest. And it wasn't like, well, Jesus, obviously, we're all walking behind him everywhere we go and doing exactly what obviously him. They're like, no, of us. Who's the greatest? It's another embarrassing one. They're probably reading this going, man, it happened exactly like that. But that sounds so much worse than I thought at the time. Sitting down, this is in verse 35, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last, the servant of all. Awesome. Part of autonomy is how we see ourselves. Part of me getting my own way and feeling like I'm in control is how am I going to be viewed by others when I go out into the world? How are they going to see me? And I want ultimately some control over that identity. And I just want to touch here again. Is Jesus being painstakingly clear about this? It's the same story. It's the same thing he's telling them. And his admonition to them after their response is basically the same thing. Like, you've got to give this up. This is important stuff. So part of this autonomy thing is identity, and we run into it all of the time when it's really clear what we should do, but it doesn't match up with some part of ourselves we kind of like that maybe isn't what God is calling us to. For some of it's being cool. Who's ever gotten to the point in life where you realize it just makes sense to drive a minivan because the doors don't hit the other car? Okay. How many of you have gotten to that point and not bought a minivan? Okay, no hands, we don't have to call anyone out. Part of it is, I am cool. I feel like I am cool. This is not a struggle for me. I'm not a cool person, and you're probably like, we get it, you don't have to elaborate, but I'm not. Here's how cool I am. Been married 14 years. Our son needs new pants, and he's now tall enough and big enough that it's like the kids' sizes aren't right. And Aaron's like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, I think he just needs to get men's pants. He's now bigger. And she goes, okay, well, I don't know. I was going to this other store. I don't know how to do that. And I was like, well, I can take him to get some pants. And she goes, do you know how to buy men's pants? She knows me better than anyone in the world. And her impression is, I just run into pants. And that's plan A. That's all I got. I'm like, yeah, I understand how men's pants are purchased in stores. So when it was time to buy a minivan, I was like, yeah, I got nothing. I'm not even, don't know how to buy pants. Give me whatever. Nobody's judging me. But for so many of us, it's understanding like, who am I? How will I be perceived? Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. We're going to read this. I have it here so I can not turn around. 1 Corinthians 9, starting in chapter 19. Chapter 9, verse 19. Paul says, though I am free and belong to no one. So hear that, because there's freedom here. This is not like have to, but it's, are you going to fight against the grain? Paul says, I'm free and belong to no one. I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law. Paul gets real theological here, though I myself am not under the law. There's chapters on that if you're interested. so as to win those under the law. How far do we go in this? More? Yeah, okay, good. I didn't know how much to put on here. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not under the law. Paul is real deep here. So as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. And this is the takeaway. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this, okay, good. I do this for the sake of the gospel that I may share in its blessings. What does it take? What level of giving up your life and dying to self does it take to be able to say, I have become all things to all people? I'm able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who voted for someone different 5 months ago. It's a low bar. Some of us can't do that, evidently. I'm able to become, not I have to really become and do everything they do, but I'm going to be someone who can be in that tribe and be comfortable because I'm not stuck on my everything, my identity, all the stuff I bring to the table that's like, well, this is what Ryan's really like. I can lay that down and go, you know what? Which part of me needs to just get filled up with Jesus only for this engagement, for this interaction? I read this week, because of this passage, the passages in Mark, the Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis is probably my favorite book ever. Other than the Bible, we're at church. It is such a good, if you've ever read anything by C.S. Lewis, he is amazing, profound thinker. The Great Divorce is about a tour bus that stops in hell and lets everyone in hell get on the tour bus, and they say, we're going to take you up to see what heaven's like. And they're like, well, what's the catch? Like, nothing. Like, if you want to stay, you can stay up there. Sounds amazing, right? And so this tour bus goes to heaven, and everybody gets off and walks around and talks to some of the people there, and pretty much everybody gets back on the bus and goes back home. Why? Because when they get there, what they find out is, yeah, no, you can stay. Come on in. That sounds awesome, right? This place is better than that place. There's one requirement, is you can't bring anything else. You can't bring your pride. You can't bring your sense of entitlement, like, well, I should have been here in the first place. You actually have to leave that right here, and then you can come in. And when you come in, you're going to be made whole, and you're going to find out that thing was so worthless. It was insane that you ever held on to it. But everybody on the bus, just about, read the book, it's awesome. And it's actually really short. Everybody on the bus has something they're just not willing to let go of. Because letting go is really, really hard. And a lot of them will say, well, I'll let go, but I'll just kind of leave it here and I'll come back and get it once that. And they're like, no, it's like forever, like die to it. And there's one character, it's one of the coolest parts of the book, but it's still worth reading after I share. It's not going to ruin anything. There's one character who's walking around, and a lot of these people, their struggle, their like thing, their letting go is like being a mom. And like, I was the mom to my son, and that's really important to me. And like, you got to let that go. That's not who you are. That's part of, So some of it's like little things like that. This guy has a lizard on his back, a red lizard that symbolizes lust. And the lizard whispers stuff in his ear, and says stuff. And he's walking around, and he's real embarrassed. He's like, this lizard, I'm sorry. I know this stuff. That's not how we talk here. And he's like, but I got it to quiet down. So I can I'll walk around. He's quiet. It's not going to bother anybody. And this angel, somebody illustrated this. I think it's really cool. This angel is like, I'll kill it for you. It'll go away. And he's like, the angel says, I can silence that thing. And he's like, oh, that would be awesome. He's like, okay, cool, I'm just going to kill it. And he's like, no, wait, what do you mean? He's like, well, that's the way, it'll never talk again if I kill it. And the angel is that like, no, I'm going to kill it now. And the guy's like, I don't know if I want it. Hold on, that's not what you said. I was thinking about silencing it. I don't know about killing it. And he's struggling with this thing. I don't know. Because he knows, there's part of this, if I'm honest, I really like it. And I know that it's awful, and I'm embarrassed, like I'm walking around going, sorry, guys. But I don't know if I'm ready to let go of this thing for it. You're saying I'll never get it back? It's not a coat check room. You're going to kill it. And the angel's like, yeah, I'm going to kill it. And his eyes are like, I want to kill that thing. Well, eventually, he lets him. The guy decides, okay, yes, I want to be rid of it. The angel grabs it and squashes it, throws it on the ground. It's dead. And as the narrator is watching, this thing transforms into this like white stallion. And the narrator has this guide in heaven who's kind of telling him what's going on. He's like, what happened there? What is that about? And he's like, well, if we actually let go, if we actually die to self, death, burial, and resurrection. And there is this promise of glory on the other side. But if he had come up and said, could you turn this into a pony? Different vibe, different response. That's not what we're doing here. Are you willing to let it go? Are you willing to die to the thing? Giving up your own way. So, there's 2 down, right? Jesus told the disciples, I'm going to die. It's going to be rough. They didn't like it. Told them again. They didn't like it. Guess what we're going to do next? Chapter 10. Guess what Jesus tells them? He says, we're going to go to Jerusalem. This is not on the screen. I'll just share it. We're going to go to Jerusalem. And he says the same stuff. But he gives a little more detail. He says, the Son of Man's going to be turned over and killed. They're going to spit on him and mock him and tie him up and all these details. It's like pretty clear. And just the embarrassment reel of these disciples continues full force. James and John came to him right after that. And they were like, teacher, again, this is humiliating. You said this out loud. We want you to do for us whatever we ask. And if you have kids, you've been in this situation where someone is literally bleeding and we're trying to evaluate, do we need to go to the emergency room or what? And we're trying to calm this person down. And another one walks up and they're like, hey, Dad, can I have dessert? Takes all the love in the world. So you go, we'll talk about dessert at a different time. And once this has happened a few times, you start realizing, hey, not whatever you're going to ask, just wait a second. Like, no, but this, I know, but no, but actually this is pretty important. And you're okay. What is it? And like, John already had a dessert. He didn't ask. Oh, that's not in the category. That is not yet. But these guys say, hey, Jesus, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. You know, you were just telling how you're going to just experience like the worst thing anyone's experienced in a couple days over there. We got a favor to ask. Love it. And the favor is, he says, what do you want me to do for you? And I don't know how he said it. That's how I would have said it. It would have been just enough in there that you would have heard, like, he didn't like that question. But let one of us sit at your right and one of us sit at your left in your glory. And he says, you don't know what you're asking for. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? And they said, we can. He said, well, you don't get it. You don't get it. He basically says, that's not going to happen. And he called everyone together and he said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. Slave of all. It's the same thing he said a chapter ago, but he's adding this word. I said servant before and y'all didn't get it. I'm saying slave, like no choices. Slaves do what they are told. Paul talks about this in Philippians 2. He talks about, there we go. Therefore, my dear friends, as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, but much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you. I'll put it on here so I don't turn around. It's God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation. Now, why is this why did I think this was important to put in here, because a lot of times the way we seize autonomy is we're going to do the thing we're supposed to do and make it really clear, this was not my choice. You ever done that? Right? I'm going to adopt the exact thing and say, yeah, I did it. I laid that down, and you know what? I didn't go to the fun thing I wanted to do. I went to this 4-year-old's birthday party of a family we barely know, and I'm going to be there and make it clear I wish I was somewhere else. And that's not what a slave is allowed to do. It's kind of like, no, you better put a smile on, bro, because this is what we're doing. And part of our autonomy is our attitude. It's what am I bringing to the table when I do what God is calling me to do? Which part of this experience am I really signing up for? Because what Jesus makes painstakingly clear is that there is one portion. And do you want it or do you not want it? It's so against. We live in a world, I can get on every social media and I can curate reality to look the way I want it to look. And Jesus is saying, this is me, this is the gospel. You can't mute one of the profiles. It's all coming at you. And a lot of us say, remember when you fed those 4,000 people? That was awesome. Okay, well now we're all going to go take up our crosses and go die together. Eesh, don't love that part. You can't just take the teachings. You can't just take the healings and the miracles. You can't just take the love part and say, that's what Jesus is for me. I'm going to do that version. This is everything. There's one portion. But the other beautiful part is that one portion comes with the afterlife of glory and an eternal revelation of Jesus. But he's saying in all of these, and they don't even comment on this part, he's like, I'm going to go, the Son of Man's going to be given over, and he's going to die. And that's what they heard, and they hated it, they're angry. And he's going to rise again. And nobody asked, tell me about that last bit. How are you going to do that? And what is that going to mean? That would change the course of human history. But that's the portion that we're being called into. And I was praying this morning. I just thought, and I've been this on Sundays. I show up and I've got stuff and I'm like, I'm trying to go be before the Lord. I'm trying to get into worship and be present. And I have this feeling, this sense that I'm doing it. And the reality is there is a calling. There is a God who stands in heaven and says, come. You are invited. I am drawing you, magnetically bringing you to me. And all you have to do is just lay it down. Whatever the thing is, just set it down, and I want to be with you. So we're going to close. We want to pray for people. Anything where you're going, I keep trying to control this and manage this outcome, and I'm frustrating myself, I'm frustrating my spouse, and I just want to let go of that. We want to pray for God to be with you in that process. I was talking to Zach right before the service, and I said, hey, he's engaged. Wait, where do you go, Zach? Zach's engaged. I said, what's the time? He goes, man, it's like 5 more months. And he goes, you got any tips? What's your best tip for marriage? I said, well, I'm about to preach on it. I said, because it is laying down autonomy. It's laying down your own way. And the people that have a really hard time staying married, at least one of them is really stuck on this is how it has to be and it's my way. And the reality of marriage is we're both laying that down, and if we're following the Lord, we say, God, what's your way for us? We're going to forge our way. It's not going to be mine. It's not going to be Aaron's. It's going to be what God is bringing us into. I said, but also good luck with that, bro. That is easier said than done. And so that's what we want to pray today. Anything where you're dealing with, where you're going, I've got something I'm just stuck on. And I didn't even know I was stuck. I wasn't trying to be intransigent and not give this up, but I just realized I'm holding on to this outcome, and I feel frustrated by it. So if I could have a prayer team come up here, and anybody who wants to get prayer, we want to pray for you. Is that life group leaders? I know there's people. Everybody stand up. Who do I got? I see life group leaders. Okay, we got people. Good. So they're going to be up here, and if you're just going, man, I'm having a hard time with this, please come down. Please receive prayer. I'm going to pray to close this, And I would invite you to come be ministered to. Lord, we stand in awe of a God who chose this way, who looked at the cross and looked at his own death and suffering and said, that is worth it to purchase freedom for the people who are in this room right now at Antioch, Austin. Jesus looked across the room and said, yes, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make a way for those people. And we just celebrate who you are, Jesus, and thank you for your mercy and your kindness. Help us today to see anything that we've allowed to stand in the way of following you full on. In Jesus' name.